Good day, everyone. I'm Thom Albrecht, the Chief Revenue Officer at Reliance Partners. And on July 23rd in Nashville, Reliance will be having its fifth Trucking Matters annual conference. And to discuss the conference and to give the audience a little bit of a preview, I'm joined by Brandon Richards, who works out of our Austin office and is our Chief Sales Officer, and by Jackson Alexander, one of our top agents. And Jackson is based out of our headquarters in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Guys, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks, Thom.
Thank you, Thom.
Well, let me give the audience just a little bit more of a preview. So the conference itself is on July 23rd. In other words, 100% of the content is that day, and it will feature 7 sessions, a mix of panels and presentations. But on July 22nd, you'll want to be there for that as well. Check-in, networking, some dinners. It really sets the stage for a great day on the 23rd. Those 7 sessions will include a litigation panel. That's right. We've got some plaintiff attorneys who like to sue the trucking industry, and I say that with a smiling face. We've got an insurance panel, a motor carrier panel, a shipper panel. I'll do a freight and economic update. We added hot off the press, something tied to Montgomery and freight brokers. And then we have a special guest from the FMCSA. And then during lunch, you could sit back and look at your phone and relax or do nothing. Or we have 3 outstanding breakout sessions, which I'll get to in just a little bit. So guys, with that overview, I'm excited. I think this year's event has more content than ever. We know that the rules of operating a trucking company and a brokerage firm are changing. Trucking capacity is tightening. When you look at the agenda, is there a panel or two that is top of mind for either of you? Maybe Jackson, start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Thom. I think it's got to be the newly added Montgomery freight broker panel, just because that's so new and such a hot topic right now. And everyone's looking forward to hear straight from some freight brokers who obviously are impacted by it and what that's going to look like. And then from the motor carrier angle as well, how is that going to impact them too? So that's got to be the one that I personally am looking most forward to.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Thom. Just jumping in here, but I think that's what makes this event unique, right? Is every year we try and focus on what carriers are actually dealing with right now, not just insurance, but what's going on in the marketplace, so much more than insurance. Most of the conversations I have with hundreds of carriers a year is really just, how do I become more profitable? How do I find better freight? How do I protect my company from things like nuclear verdicts, the fraud that's out there, the regulatory changes that are happening? So for me personally, my favorite panel, it's kind of split between the shipper panel and the litigation panel. I think those are great, especially having the FMCSA involved this year. There's so many changes happening around safety scores, enforcement, technology, fraud, just compliance in general. I think having the ability for carriers to hear directly from the people that help shape those rules and enforce those things is something you don't get to hear from very often. So that's what I'm excited about this year.
Well, that's a great segue. For our audience, we do have confirmed that Jesse Elison, who is the Deputy Administrator for the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, will be there. He will be conducting a town hall live Q&A. So it's a chance not only to ask some of those questions post-Montgomery, for example, what's the FMCSA thinking about regulations, but a lot of different things that folks are wondering about. Why not a national CDL? What else can you do to better enforce English language proficiency or things that maybe we don't even think about today? So we're very excited to have that. For our audience, Deputy Administrator simply means second in command. And I had the privilege of meeting with Administrator Derek Bars just 2 weeks ago, and he confirmed that. So it's a real coup for us. When I think about a couple of things, maybe back to you, Jackson, you mentioned the motor carrier panel. What do you think folks get out of that? Because every year it sounds like it should be the same topics, but it really isn't. Last year we had a big discussion about whether to factor or not. How do you get more direct customer relationships? Any highlights from the past or what you hope to hear about this year?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the best panels every year. I think that the motor carriers in attendance really enjoy that they're able to learn from some of their peers and ask them questions, right? A lot of the questions in the past from the audience have been from other trucking companies, asking motor carriers that might be a little bit bigger than them and what they've done to be able to grow their fleet and continue to operate profitably and the procedures they put into place in order to do that. There's always the hot topic of when to utilize freight brokers, when and how to access shippers directly, the profit margins between the two. So That's definitely one of the more intriguing panels.
Brandon, I think you also mentioned the freight brokerage panel, which is actually entitled Life After Montgomery, which is pretty self-explanatory. But for our audience, those freight brokers are of varying sizes, a couple that are under $200 million, one that's over $300 million, and then one that's around $1 billion. So we're going to hear different perspectives on compliance, vetting, how they're viewing the world of risk, what data they're incorporating. It's going to be fantastic. I just kind of throw that back to you guys there. I think the litigation panel will also be timely because they're also going to be weighing in on Montgomery.
Yeah, I look at it this way. Obviously, brokers are looking closely at how this changes their operations and their exposure. But carriers also need to understand this because broker and carriers depend on each other. It doesn't work unless both of them are in synergy working together. So let's talk about it, right? There's always been tension between brokers and carriers, especially when freight's tight. But the reality is that both companies are trying to accomplish the same thing, which is build relationships, protect customers, and eliminate the bad characters or bad actors that are out there in the trucking industry. From our perspective, from an insurance perspective, anytime we have changes that impact liability, right? Contracts, risk transfer, who is ultimately responsible when something goes wrong? Everybody in the supply chain needs to understand how that impacts them and what they can do to protect themselves and the supply chain against those scenarios. So I think that panel is going to give everybody a good chance to understand everybody's challenges. But like you said, Thom, hear it from some of the largest freight brokers in the country. And look, I love the litigation panel. Last year, I believe we had 2 defense attorneys and 1 plaintiff attorney. This year, we're flip-flopping that. So I think that's going to be interesting. And I've never seen that at all the conferences I've been to before. And Thom, I know you go to a lot of them also, but I've never seen a panel of both sides of the aisle. We always hear from defense attorneys, but we never get to hear from the other side. So I think that's one of the most exciting things that we got to witness last year was having the plaintiff attorney up there walking through those things. And what I love about that is whether we agree with them or not, they're the ones sitting across the aisle or across the table when something goes wrong. So understanding how those plaintiff attorneys are evaluating trucking companies after a crash is extremely valuable. What are they looking for? How do these mistakes hurt the company? What documentation are they looking for? And the most important thing to me from this that trucking companies can take from it is what could the trucking company have done differently before the accident ever happened? And so it's about making changes before an accident happens because a lot of these verdicts don't happen after the claim. They happen 6 months, a year, 2 years before that accident ever took place because of practices, procedures, documentation. So I'm excited about those panels.
Well, at the event I'm at right now in North Carolina, I've got a factoid for both of you that I have not shared. I was with a company last night, over 20 billion of revenues. He told me that last week they had reassessed the insurance standards that they are going to require for motor carriers and brokers. They had to let go of 131 transportation and logistics partners they've been with many years because they're not going to be able to flex into the new world of their insurance requirements. 131. I was shocked. This guy may end up coming to our conference, by the way. He was really excited to hear more about it. But yeah, I think it's timely. It's unbelievable. Let's go back to the shipper panel for a minute. You mentioned you don't really see a litigation panel with both plaintiffs and the defense, and the defense will be represented by Scopelitis just for our audience. But have you ever been to an insurance agency conference where you're going to get to hear the voices of General Mills, Simmons Foods, which is the largest cat food maker? We've got KBX, Armada, and Shaw Industries, which I believe is the world's largest flooring company. So it's not just carpet, but it's tile and other floor coverings. Our attendance tends to be a lot of carriers between 50 and maybe 300, 400 trucks at the most. They don't get a chance to really sit down with a General Mills very often. What do you guys think about that value?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been to another conference that really showcases that and has that sort of visibility. And those shippers, I can confidently say, after that panel is over, there's a line of people waiting to go talk to them. If they didn't ask their questions out loud in front of the audience, they want to talk to them one-on-one and get to know how they can move freight for them, whether they're a freight broker or a motor carrier going directly. And I think that visibility is really, really unique. I know my clients on the motor carrier side are always like, hey, can you introduce me to this person? Or can you have Thom go introduce me to them? Because they want to get to know them and build rapport. Everything in this business is relationships. And to be able to form some of those with shippers directly is really, really cool and something that I think not a lot of events offer that this one does.
For our audience and for you guys, we'll have another handful or so of shippers in the audience who aren't going to be on a panel because the word's starting to get out. And so, again, I think there'll be some opportunities for good quality conversations. Another element that I'm excited about is actually our insurance panel, which oftentimes may sound like the least pretty girl at the dance, so to speak. So, first of all, our CEO, Andrew, is so good at just being very conversational. But I had shippers say to me, I'm always hearing from the motor carriers about insurance, and I don't know what to make of it. That was explained so well for me that I can take things back to my C-suite. So I'd love for you guys just to talk about the insurance panel that we'll have as well.
Yeah, a lot of times because there are so many different lanes in the supply chain, right? So freight brokers, trucking companies, as professional insurance agents, we get it because this is what we understand. It's what we do. That's why people hire us to provide policies and coverage to them. But a lot of times on the other side of it, they don't necessarily understand how that coverage impacts their business or what coverages apply to what scenario and how to protect themselves and what insurance actually does. So I think that's a big part of that panel is actually understanding what's out there. But the other part of it is the insurance companies, everything in the environment's changing on the insurance side, just like it is with the freight brokers and with that ruling. So insurance companies are using technology these days to determine and to figure out ways to identify, again, bad actors so that they can root out the bad ones from the good ones. And it's our job as an agent because what we do all the time is we go to these underwriters and say, look, this is what we're presenting, and we want you to see this point, that point, and the other on why this customer is a good customer compared to what you're seeing out there in the marketplace through other accounts that you're seeing. And so presenting them in the best light, being able to show the insurance companies what makes a good customer and what that portfolio looks like is important. So I think that's good. Just like you said with the shippers, being able to pull back the curtain and see the great Oz behind it. It's the same way with the insurance companies where you're able to actually talk directly to insurance companies and what they're looking for in underwriting and why they underwrite a certain way and what's important to them on a submission and a trucking company that they're looking at. So Jackson, I know you deal with that every single day that you're out there doing what you do. So tell us a little bit, especially with your underwriting background, what you looked for as an underwriter and how that impacts things.
Yeah, I think the ability as a motor carrier, as an insured, to meet your underwriter, whether it's one that's on the panel or one of the many other insurance companies we have just attending the event, that level of visibility is super, super cool. And that it kind of proves that, hey, insured, it's not just me. When I tell you this, now you can really believe me because you get to hear from them directly. Talk to the underwriter. Talk to the business development rep, talk to the underwriting manager, whoever it is there. When I was an underwriter before I joined Reliance Partners, that was one of the coolest things I got to do is meet my actual insureds. And now to have a whole bunch of motor carriers in one room and be able to talk to not only their underwriter, but maybe another underwriter that they received a quote from in years past and get to learn about their appetite a little bit more, what they're doing on the tech side and what's impacting their rating model moving forward. To be able to have it and hear it directly from that word of mouth has been one of the most valuable things in years past at this conference.
One of the things I enjoyed earlier this year, Jackson, was you and I down in Dallas, where you had brought a couple of underwriters and the audience asked them questions. And honestly, it was riveting. I think it helped that you had some underwriters that were willing to be very transparent. So we'll have some on stage. We'll have some others there just in attendance. Maybe they're part of the sponsorship package. But to be able to ask questions of these underwriters, it's no longer like I think, Brandon, you shared somebody behind the curtain over there. It's a real person thinking about risk and your business strategy, and you can really break down some barriers when you get a chance to actually talk to them and not just have it go through an electronic submission with your agent. One of the great traditions at our conference has been during lunch hour, which actually is 90 minutes, about 45 minutes for food. We have these breakout sessions. Now, folks can take a nap, look at their phone, do whatever. Or this year, we actually have 3 breakout sessions. In the past, we've done 2. First of all, those breakout sessions are one with our safety impact team, where they're going to be reviewing important FMCSA compliance and regulatory information, now more important than ever, simply because of the changing standards and expectations by brokers and shippers. A second one will be what we're calling the next frontier of fraud, theft, and vetting. We're going to feature Scott Cornell of Logistique. I always botch that name. and also Michael Caney of Highway. Anyway, they're preeminent experts on these subjects of fraud, theft, carrier vetting. And I think you're going to want to hear why going down to the VIN number and the driver level are more important than ever post Montgomery on May 14th. And then the third breakout session is with our friends from Allianz. They're going to be talking about trade credit. And trade credit is different than factoring. At a time where things are changing so rapidly, you're going to want to make sure you've got capital to grow and make as much money as possible during what now appears to be a full-blown bull market for motor carriers. So great opportunities during our 3 breakout sessions.
I think the safety one is the one that might be the most well attended, but also the most engaging in years past. And I think this year is going to be probably prove that true again, only because of what's happening with the Montgomery case. Robinson just announced that, hey, we're not working with motor carriers that have more than 2 CSA alerts. And so these trucking companies that have those problems have to get it fixed if they continue to rely on spot freight. And if brokers won't work with you because your safety score is like, this breakout session is the one that you need to attend. So I expect that one to be even more engaging than it has been in years past because of what's going on with that case.
Well, and that's going to be a great question for the plaintiff attorneys. I may put a slide together and say, broker X, 2 CSA alerts or less, broker Y, 4 CSA alerts, or ISS scores of X. Both of those are going to be open to litigation at some point. We live in a world right now that's very gray, and everybody wants to understand what's black and white, but we're not going to be there right away. So those discussions, I think, are going to be very beneficial to hear from both sides of the aisle from a litigation perspective.
Absolutely. And look, I love the breakout sessions. The main sessions don't get as granular as the breakout sessions do. You get the big picture, but the breakout sessions, it's a smaller group. You get to talk through specific issues. And that's where the best conversations happen, in my opinion, is after the session actually ends, where people get to talk amongst themselves and talk to the speakers and the individuals that were involved in that and ask questions like, hey, here's my exact situation. What would you do? Or how would you approach this from that angle? And that's one of the things I love about these breakout sessions. It creates that environment where people can have those open conversations, talk directly to people at the head of these companies where, let's face it, if you try and call Michael Caney at Highway and get in touch with him, that's going to be very difficult to do through a phone, right? But guess what? He's going to be at the event. You have his undivided attention. Same thing with Jesse from the FMCSA, some of these shippers that you mentioned. So there's a lot of good stuff there. And even on our team, I'm going to brag on our brokerage team that's always involved with things out there. But Chad Eichelberger, Ronald Ramsey that's on our team, some of the best in the industry that know that industry better than anybody and know how it works with not just the freight brokerage side or just the insurance side, but how the two of them work together to make sure that you're protecting yourself, understanding the coverages that are available, but also understanding the landscape that's out there. So I think that's what makes a difference. It's not just people talking at you all day like a lot of these conferences. It's the great conversations in between with carriers and insurance folks and legal experts and technology companies. Well, Thom, I know there's a session we haven't really talked about, but it's one of my favorite ones always. And it doesn't matter where I'm at in the country, but I love to listen to this one. It's your session. So I've got a couple questions for you, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So with the way everything's going right now, one thing I'm interested in hearing from you is what you're seeing around the freight market. And I know you just had a great conversation with some folks where you were at this week. Actually, twice this week you did that. So give us a little bit about what you're seeing around the freight market around the country, because you were East Coast and West Coast this week.
So first of all, the numbers are moving so fast, as well as the anecdotes. But even on Monday, when I uploaded a slide for a different event out west, the tender rejection rate was just crossing 16%. Here we are 4 days later, it's knocking on 18%. And shipper networks get uncomfortable when that tender rejection rate gets above about 9 to 10%. So we're in very interesting periods. The spot market rate in the last 30 days is up about 90 cents a mile. Some of that, of course, is fuel, but the vast majority of it is getting motor carriers to cover loads. And so we're going to explore that. We're going to explore the implications of Montgomery, what that may mean for shippers getting coverage, and in turn, what that means for the motor carrier community. And I think one of the takeaways is, yes, in the short term, maybe small motor carriers and brokers have to take a step back while bigger brokers kind of shake out their network a little bit and shippers put in some extra requirements. But if you're committed to doing things the right way, within the next quarter or so, you're going to be revisited by compliant freight brokers. You're going to be revisited by shippers that maybe reduce their load count to you because they weren't sure of this risky environment. It's going to be possibly better than the best of COVID. That's how good this market appears to be headed right now. And one of the things I like to share, Brandon and Jackson, is if we look at the last 3 cycles before COVID, they each had one regulatory change. And we've already had 5 things that have been touched. They need to be fine-tuned a little bit further, like English language proficiency or no more third-party certification of ELDs. And we know more is coming. But there's another 5, 6, 8 things that are in the pipeline. So this environment, this recovery could have legs that is longer than what we've seen from the last 3 or 4 trucking recoveries. So I think folks are going to want to be there. They're going to want to process that. I had shippers come up to me today asking about if they could have these slides to make sure they could communicate to their own teams.
Absolutely. And that's always one of the biggest questions is, when is it going to get better?
Yes. Well, in the spirit of Groundhog Day, tomorrow arrived about 5 or 6 months ago. And so the next question is, how long is it going to last? And so that slide in particular, I'm going to leave it out there as a teaser, but I really believe it will be value added to think about that and some new material that we're working on. And it's not to promote motor carriers over shippers. Last year and the year before, I gave messages that were pretty dour to the motor carrier community, but things have changed and our job is to help everyone, at least relative to the next 12 months. And anything beyond that is a bonus.
Right. My last question for you here on that, and I'll leave it alone, but this is kind of a two-sided question. But now that we're in that, what should carriers be doing now to position themselves to win over the next couple of years? And what should they be doing now to prepare for, like you said, when it does change next, so that they can be preparing for that now to be ready?
Well, the number one thing is to become extremely diligent around documentation, processes, standard operating procedures. If there's been any leaks in the boat, plug every one of those. And if you're a freight broker, obviously they're going through and looking at what are our policies around exceptions when we let a motor carrier handle something that we may not have let them handle before, or if we've cut off a motor carrier and we're bringing them back in. That's what you're going to want to hear what other people are doing around that. And for the motor carriers, I think that breakout session with Mark and Daniel will be great. What do they need to be focused on? And it's not so much that you have to have maybe 0 CSA alerts, but if you've got 3, do you have a plan that you can explain to your broker partners and your motor carrier customers how you're on the way to 2 and then how you're on the way to 1 and potentially 0? Those kinds of corrective action plans are going to be more valuable than they've been in maybe decades. So sharpen your pencils, be diligent, and get ready to make some money.
That's great. Thank you, Thom.
Well, for folks that have been listening, the best way to sign up is to simply go to Reliance Partners, look for the Trucking Matters link, and you can sign up direct there. There is no cost. That's why we're so grateful for our sponsors that we'll talk about that day in Nashville. But really, I can't think of a day that pound for pound will deliver as much as this event will deliver this year. It's always fun. It's always value added, but with change in the air, this is the year to come to Reliance Partners Trucking Matters event on July 23rd in Nashville. So I look forward to seeing everyone. Brandon and Jackson, thank you for your insights.
Hey, thank you. And we look forward to seeing everyone in Nashville.
Can't wait.